I took a deep breath, trying to control my emotions as I stood before the executive team of Quantum Innovations, the leading technology corporation where I had dedicated myself for the past 4 years. Project Helios, the most advanced artificial intelligence system I had spent 3 years developing, was finally ready for its crucial investor presentation. After countless long days and sleepless nights, it was time to reap the rewards. My name is Ava Mitchell, 34 years old, lead engineer, and the mind behind the entire design of Helios. I had poured my heart and soul into this project. Every line of code, every algorithm, every aspect of the system bore my mark. Today was supposed to be the day I proudly introduced it to the world. "Impressive, Ava," said Margaret Hayes, the company's CEO, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I was all too familiar with that expression, a sign that something was wrong. "However, we need to make a few adjustments before the investor presentation." A chill ran down my spine. "Adjustments?" I kept my voice calm, though my pulse had quickened. "The project has already passed all testing and evaluations. There's nothing left to change." Margaret waved a hand dismissively, as if what I said was irrelevant. "I'm not talking about the project, Ava." I glanced around the conference room. Everyone avoided my gaze. Some stared down at their documents while others pretended not to hear. Ryan Carter, the chief technology officer, frowned in confusion, clearly unaware of what was happening. "I don't understand," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I have led this project from day one." "Exactly." Margaret leaned forward, her tone sharp. "You've done a great job in development, but for the investor presentation, we need someone with more executive presence." Before I could respond, the conference room doors swung open. A young woman with striking blue eyes and an air of false confidence strode in. Sophie Hayes, Margaret's daughter. A surge of anger rose within me. Sophie had joined the company just 6 months ago as a special consultant, but everyone knew she was only here because of her mother. "Sophie will be presenting Project Helios," Margaret announced proudly. "She has an MBA from Harvard and the perfect image to attract investors." I clenched my fists under the table, struggling to keep my composure. "But she doesn't understand the technology behind this project. This isn't just a sales pitch, it's a groundbreaking AI innovation." "Which is why you'll still be involved, Ava," Sophie interjected, her tone dripping with condescension. "You'll serve as technical support." The room tilted. 3 years of my life reduced to technical support for someone who didn't even grasp the basics of my work? I lowered my voice, almost whispering, "This is ridiculous." Ryan abruptly stood up. "Ava is the brain behind this entire project. The investors need to understand the technology, not just hear a rehearsed presentation." Margaret turned to him, her tone sharp. "Ryan, this is an executive decision. It's not up for debate." I scanned the room again, waiting for someone to speak up, but no one did. They just looked down, silently accepting the decision. "You should be grateful," Sophie smirked. "Most companies don't even keep the technical team after a project is completed." And that was the moment I realized I had always known this might happen. I had always known that one day, Margaret would try to steal my work. I took a slow, deep breath, locking eyes with Margaret and Sophie. Did they think I was just an engineer with no power? They had no idea I had been preparing for this day all along. I tightened my grip, staring directly at them. Did they think they could push me aside and take everything I had built? They didn't know that I had anticipated this move. Calmly, I opened my laptop, my fingers gliding over the keyboard. The email was ready. I had written it months ago as a safeguard. Because I knew Margaret would never truly recognize my contributions. With a single click, I sent the email to the entire board of directors, senior advisors, and major shareholders of Quantum Innovations. The message wasn't just a complaint. It contained hard evidence of numerous shady transactions, including internal documents proving that Margaret had sold Helios's confidential data to rival companies. The moment I hit send, a series of notification chimes echoed throughout the room. Every executive in the room checked their phones and laptops. All eyes turned to Margaret. She picked up her phone, her expression shifting from confusion to shock, then to sheer panic. "What is this?" Margaret blurted out, her voice losing its usual composure. I stood there, unwavering. "It's just the truth." Ryan Carter, the chief technology officer, frowned as he read the email. He looked at me, then at Margaret. "Margaret, is this true?" No one in the room spoke. No one knew what to do as Margaret's entire scheme was exposed right before their eyes. The conference room door swung open again. Robert Lancaster, chairman of the board, entered with 2 lawyers. He was one of the most influential figures in the company, always maintaining a neutral stance. But I knew he had long harbored suspicions about Margaret. "I think we need to talk," Robert said in a calm but authoritative voice. Margaret froze for a moment, then quickly regained her composure. "Robert, I can explain. This is clearly a misunderstanding." "There is no misunderstanding here, Margaret," I interrupted. "All the evidence is in the email. I have also sent copies to the company's legal team." Margaret stiffened. I could see real fear in her eyes. "You have no right to do this, Ava," Sophie suddenly spoke up, her voice laced with anger. "You're just an engineer." I smiled. "Actually, I have more power than you think." I slowly walked to the conference table and placed a folder down. Has anyone ever wondered why I've remained so calm? I looked at Margaret, then at Sophie. Because I've been preparing for this moment for a long time. I opened the folder. On the first page was a stock transfer agreement. Before Henry Foster, the founder of Quantum Innovations, retired, he sold 40% of his shares to me. I emphasized every word, letting it sink in. Margaret turned pale. "You're lying." I chuckled. "You can check with the legal department if you'd like." Ryan, who now seemed to fully grasp what was happening, looked at me with newfound respect. "You own 40% of the shares? That means you have more authority than Margaret?" I nodded, and that's not all. I pulled out a USB drive, plugged it into the conference room projector, and a video began to play. On the screen, Henry Foster appeared. "Margaret, if you're watching this, it means you have gone too far. I warned you multiple times that this company is not your personal asset. You have abused your power, betrayed the trust of those who believed in you. That is why I entrusted the future of Quantum Innovations to Ava Mitchell." The room fell into absolute silence. Sophie stood motionless, her blue eyes filled with fear. "Mom, what is this?" Margaret clenched her fists, her gaze burning with fury as she looked at me. But this time, she had nowhere left to run. Robert Lancaster broke the silence. "Margaret Hayes, you are immediately suspended from your position. The board will convene an emergency meeting to officially remove you as CEO." Margaret collapsed into her chair. For the first time, she had completely lost control. I turned to Sophie, my voice calm but deliberate. "And you? Do you want to come clean, or should we expose everything about you to the compliance board?" Sophie opened her mouth, as if about to say something, but then fell silent, her face drained of all color. The emergency meeting took place shortly after, and as I had expected, the outcome was irreversible. Margaret was fired immediately and faced multiple financial misconduct charges. As I stepped out of the conference room, I felt a cool breeze brush past me. Ryan walked up beside me, admiration in his eyes. "How long have you been planning this?" I smiled. "A year," he nodded. "Impressive." I simply shrugged. Because this wasn't over. Margaret had been dethroned, but I knew there were still more secrets to uncover. And more importantly, I had to ensure that Quantum Innovations would never fall into the hands of people like her again. Margaret Hayes sat motionless, her face devoid of the power she once commanded. The board had just delivered their final decision. She was terminated immediately and would now face a formal investigation for financial fraud and abuse of power. Robert Lancaster's words, chairman of the board, still echoed throughout the conference room. We cannot allow someone who has exploited this company for personal gain to remain in power. Security entered the room, ready to escort Margaret out of Quantum Innovations headquarters. She stiffened, then suddenly stood up, her eyes filled with fury as she glared at me. "Do you think you can defeat me, Ava?" Her voice no longer carried its usual artificial composure. "You have no idea how many years I've spent building this empire." I remained calm. "Building?" I repeated, my gaze unwavering. "You didn't build anything, Margaret. You merely exploited and manipulated others to maintain control." She let out a bitter chuckle, but I could see the panic in her eyes. "You'll regret this, Ava." I crossed my arms, responding gently. "You can try, but that won't change the truth. The board's investigation will begin soon, and this time, there's nothing left for you to hide." I saw the flicker of realization in Margaret's eyes. She knew the battle was over. Security stepped forward, instructing her to leave. Margaret jerked her arm away from them, holding her head high as if she was still in control. But no one in the room saw her as a leader anymore. They only saw someone who had lost everything. The moment the conference room doors shut behind her, an eerie silence filled the air. I turned to Sophie Hayes, who had remained motionless, her face pale. "Sophie!" I called her name. She lifted her head, her gaze empty. "Do you have anything to say?" Sophie swallowed hard, her blue eyes darting around the room, now filled with scrutinizing stares. She knew she could no longer protect her mother. "My mother, she told me to do it." Sophie's voice grew quieter, almost a whisper. "I didn't think it would go this far." I met her eyes, my tone no longer cold like when confronting Margaret, but still firm. "You helped her deceive this entire company. Do you understand the consequences of that?" Sophie shuddered. For the first time, the arrogance had disappeared from her face. "I didn't have a choice," she murmured. But I shook my head. "There's always a choice, Sophie. You just took the easiest one." She bit her lip, as if battling her own thoughts. Her entire life, she had lived under her mother's shadow, following every command. And now, with Margaret fallen, she didn't know what to do next. Robert Lancaster looked at Sophie, his voice stern. "The board will be investigating everyone involved in this. If you cooperate, we may consider leniency." Sophie froze. Could she turn against her mother? Or would she cling to the false reality Margaret had built? She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. And then, I saw a small but undeniable shift in her expression. She opened them again. "I will cooperate." Sophie spoke slowly but firmly. "I will tell the truth." 3 days later, I sat in my office, gazing out the window at the city below. The official investigation had begun. Margaret faced multiple charges, from financial fraud to abuse of power. And Sophie? She had indeed testified. Her statement became crucial evidence in strengthening the case. Today, Sophie stood before me. Gone were the designer dresses and the smug smile. She was just a young woman who had finally realized how deeply she had erred. "I know. There's no reason for you to forgive me." Sophie's voice trembled slightly. I just wanted to say that I truly regret everything." I studied her for a moment before nodding. "Regret means nothing if you don't do something to change." She swallowed hard, then pulled out a piece of paper and placed it on my desk. "This is a job application." I frowned, glancing at the document. Sophie was applying for a position at the company? "I want to start over," she said, her voice devoid of arrogance, only sincerity. "Not as Margaret Hayes' daughter, but as myself." I looked at her for a long moment. Sophie Hayes, the person who once stood before me and took credit for my work, was now asking for a chance to start over. I considered it, then pushed the application back toward her. "You can work in the marketing department at the lowest position," I stated clearly. "No privileges, no special treatment. If you want to prove yourself, start from the ground up." Sophie nodded. For the first time, I saw that she was no longer looking for shortcuts. I knew this wasn't the end, but at least it could be a new beginning. 3 months later, I stepped into the grand hall of Quantum Innovations, where the official launch of Project Helios was taking place. The massive LED screen displayed impressive numbers, reflecting the overwhelming market interest. The project had exceeded all expectations, becoming one of the greatest breakthroughs in artificial intelligence. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are not just unveiling a new technological product. We are reaffirming the core values of this company: innovation, integrity, and transparency. Applause filled the auditorium. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the recognition I had fought so hard to earn. Helios was more than just a product. It was proof of what a dedicated, ethical team could accomplish when free from manipulation and personal agendas. Ryan Carter, the Chief Technology Officer, stood beside me, his expression filled with pride. "Ava, you did it!" I looked over at the engineering team, the people who had fought alongside me for 3 years. We did it. I adjusted the microphone and continued my speech. Helios is not the achievement of one individual, but the result of a collective effort. A company cannot grow without trust and ethics. From this day forward, quantum innovations will not only lead in technology, but also in business integrity. The applause returned, louder this time. The shareholders, investors, and employees all understood the company had entered a new era. As I stepped down from the stage, Robert Lancaster was waiting. "That was an excellent speech, Ava." I nodded. "Thank you. But I think there's still unfinished business to take care of." Robert raised an eyebrow. "You mean Margaret?" I smiled, but my eyes were firm. Not long after her termination, Margaret underwent an official investigation for financial fraud and abuse of power. All the evidence my team and I had gathered left no room for denial. When the trial concluded, Margaret was placed under house arrest for 5 years in order to pay a significant financial settlement to the company. Once a woman who held immense power, she now had no influence left in the business world. My office door opened and Sophie stepped inside. She no longer carried the arrogance she once had. For the past 3 months, she had worked diligently in the marketing department with no privileges at all. "There's news about my mother," she said quietly. I looked up from my screen, waiting. "I heard that no one wants to work with her anymore. The people who once supported her have all turned their backs." I wasn't surprised. In business, losing credibility means losing everything. "And what about you?" I asked. "What do you think about all of this?" Sophie remained silent for a moment. "I used to think my mother was unstoppable, but now I realize she wasn't as powerful as I believed." I studied her, noticing a genuine shift. No more arrogance, no more entitlement. Just a person learning how to walk the right path. "You've been given a second chance," I said slowly. "Make sure you don't follow in your mother's footsteps." Sophie nodded. This time, I believed she truly understood. I turned back to my screen. Helios was thriving. Quantum Innovations had become a company built on transparency and integrity. Exactly the vision my team and I had fought for. I knew this wasn't the end. But it was the beginning of a new era. An era where people like Margaret Hayes would never have the chance to manipulate their way to the top again. 1 year later, I stepped into the office of Quantum Innovations, gazing through the transparent glass at the city skyline. Helios had become a resounding success, not just in terms of technology, but also in the values it brought to the field of artificial intelligence. But there was one thing I gradually realized. Success wasn't just about the numbers on a report. It was about the culture we were building. Quantum Innovations had once been a company riddled with manipulation, where those with power used connections to climb the ranks without true competence. But now, that had changed. Ryan Carter knocked lightly on my office door. "Ava, there's a new candidate who wants to meet you. I think you'll want to hear his story." I raised an eyebrow and motioned for him to bring the candidate in. A young man, around 24 years old, stepped inside, his eyes filled with determination. He extended his hand and I shook it, sensing the confidence of someone who had fought hard for this opportunity. "I'm Ethan Sullivan, software engineer." I nodded, glancing over his resume on my desk. An impressive background, but without the flashy names like Harvard or MIT. "Ethan, what made you choose Quantum Innovations?" I asked, curious about his real reason for being here. He gave a small smile, but his eyes reflected sincerity. Because here, talent and integrity matter more than connections. I looked directly at Ethan, feeling the weight of his words. That sentence took me back to my own past, when I was overlooked and pushed aside, simply because I didn't have the right status. "Where did you work before?" I asked. Ethan took a quiet breath, hesitated slightly, then replied. "I worked at a small startup. I developed an algorithm that optimized data processing, but someone else took credit for it." I wasn't surprised. This story was all too familiar. "They pushed you out?" I asked, my tone even. Ethan nodded. I was just a young engineer without industry connections, but I didn't let that stop me from moving forward. I remained silent for a moment, then stood up. "Ethan, I want you to know one thing. Here, no one is overlooked just because they lack connections. If you do well, you will be recognized. No one can take your work away from you." He clenched his fist slightly, as if realizing he had finally found a place where he truly belonged. "Thank you, Ava. That's exactly why I want to work here." After Ethan left my office, I leaned back in my chair, reflecting on my own journey. I had once thought that Helios would be my greatest legacy, but now I understood that true legacy wasn't just about a product. It was about creating an environment where capable people were truly valued, where transparency was the foundation of the company. I thought of Lucas Dawson, the founder of Quantum Innovations, the man who entrusted me with his majority shares. I wondered, if he were here, would he be proud of what I had done? I stood up, stepped outside, and saw groups of young engineers engaged in passionate discussions in the company's open workspace. They weren't people relying on connections to advance. They were people who believed in hard work and integrity. I knew then, this was the legacy I wanted to leave behind. Ava Mitchell's story is not just a battle for justice, it is proof of the power of integrity and perseverance. In a world where power and connections sometimes overshadow true talent, Ava demonstrated that ethics and transparency are the true foundations of lasting success. In reality, many people have been pushed aside and denied credit for their work. But like Ava, if you believe in your worth and keep fighting, you can create change. What do you think of Ava Mitchell's story? Have you ever witnessed or experienced something similar in your career or life? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more inspiring stories about life, family, and valuable lessons. Under the soft yellow glow of the Christmas tree, the room was filled with the scent of gingerbread and cinnamon. The light from the fireplace danced across the old decorations my mom had kept since I was a child. Outside, snow fell quietly, leaving a hazy layer over the window pane. But the cold I felt didn't come from winter. It sat deeper, in my chest, in the quiet tightness between the smiles and hopeful glances. Everything about this Christmas felt uncomfortably familiar. And just like every year, I knew exactly what was about to happen. My mom, in a bright red robe, stood in the middle of the living room with such satisfaction that you could feel it even before she spoke. She held a small box, wrapped in shimmering gold paper and tied with a delicate white bow. My dad sat beside her, a cup of tea in his hand, his face thoughtful but his eyes full of pride. And at the center of it all, just like always, was Lauren, my sister. Lauren sat perfectly poised on the couch, red nails tracing the rim of her hot chocolate mug, her silky blonde hair flawlessly in place. Her smile was part excitement, part certainty that the best thing in the room would always belong to her. Mom stepped forward, placing the gift box into Lauren's hands, her voice brimming with excitement. "We've been planning this gift for a long time. You deserve it." Lauren blinked, then slowly began unwrapping the paper, just enough to let everyone feel the anticipation in each movement. She always knew how to stretch a moment so that all eyes stayed on her. Even before seeing it, I already knew it would be something special. Not just an ordinary gift, and I was right. As the final piece of wrapping fell away, the small box opened to reveal a gleaming silver key nestled in black velvet. Lauren gasped, a sharp breath escaping as if she'd just been handed the rarest diamond in the world. I can't believe it. Her voice soared, as perfect as a line from a luxury commercial. My mom placed a hand on her shoulder, voice full of pride. Sweetheart, this is the key to your new home. We bought you your own apartment. Now you have a place of your own. The room erupted in congratulations. My dad nodded in approval. Lauren threw herself into both of their arms, repeating, thank you, as if she had just received the greatest gift of her life. I sat silently. In my lap was a small white envelope, no heavier than a single sheet of paper. No shiny box, no elegant bow. Just a plain envelope, unmentioned, no one waiting for me to open it. I didn't even need to look inside to know there was nothing special. Dad had handed it to me quickly, like a chore he had to check off. No warm gaze, no trembling voice of emotion. Just a nod and a hollow phrase. This is for you. I ran my finger along the edge of the envelope, feeling the thin, weightless paper inside. Meanwhile, Lauren was still holding up the key like it was a royal crown. She beamed, pure joy shining in her eyes without a hint of restraint. And I just quietly clenched my envelope. Because I knew exactly what it meant. It wasn't just a half-hearted Christmas present. It was a statement, a reminder, a message that didn't need to be spoken. In this family, Lauren was the most important one. And I was just the leftover. I tightened my grip on the envelope, feeling the paper so fragile it might tear with the slightest squeeze. But I didn't open it. There was no need. I already knew what was inside. A lifeless card, maybe with a small check, just enough for my parents to tell themselves they still cared, but not enough for me to think I actually mattered. Lauren kept smiling, holding the key up like it was a piece of fine jewelry. I quietly looked away from the scene. I didn't want to see anymore. Because I knew, if I kept watching, the memories would start flooding back, and I didn't have the strength to hold them off. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the memories take me. My 9th birthday. I had been excited all week, planning a little party by myself. I didn't ask for much. Just a small cake, a warm dinner with my family, and maybe a little present. But that morning, Mom told me Lauren had a big rehearsal for her upcoming ballet performance. You know your sister needs to focus on her performance, right? Opportunities like this don't come often, she said, her voice light, like it wasn't a big deal. I nodded, swallowing the disappointment curling in my chest. So instead of a birthday party, I sat alone in the kitchen, baking my own cake. I spread the frosting and tried to decorate it with little chocolate flowers, telling myself the cake was enough. But that night when I blew out the candles, alone, while everyone talked about Lauren's rehearsal, I realized something. It wasn't that they forgot my birthday. They just didn't care. 8th grade science fair. I had spent weeks building a wind turbine model, a project so detailed that even my science teacher was impressed by its precision. When the results came in, I won 1st place. That sense of pride lasted only a few minutes, until I realized my parents weren't in the crowd clapping. I stood on stage, hands trembling as I held my certificate, scanning the audience. But no one was there. Later, when I got home, Mom didn't even remember the fair was that day. We had to take Lauren to an audition. You know those chances don't come easy, she said, not even looking up from her phone. Dad just nodded, like it wasn't worth talking about. And I quietly tucked the certificate into a drawer, where no one ever mentioned it again. Senior year scholarship. I used to think if I tried just a little harder, if I achieved something truly big, they'd have to see me differently. So I pushed myself, studying late every night, signing up for every test, joining every activity that might catch the admissions board's attention. And finally, after all that effort, I got a full-ride scholarship to one of the top universities in the country. I walked into the living room, heart pounding, hoping for that proud, overjoyed reaction. But when I placed the acceptance letter on the table, Mom glanced at it for a second and sighed. At least you're good at something. That was it. No hug, no celebratory dinner, not even a word of encouragement. All my hard work, sleepless nights, and stress boiled down to a careless remark. And Lauren? When she got into a regular art school, my parents threw her a party, invited neighbors, bragged about her promising future. I opened my eyes, pulling myself back to the present. Lauren was still beaming, hugging Mom, thanking her over and over. I relaxed my hand, letting the envelope fall into my lap. Those memories weren't random moments. They were proof of an undeniable truth. I had never mattered in this family. Lauren was the shining star, and I was just a shadow. But what they didn't know was that shadows had their own kind of power. This year, I wouldn't let them do it again. 2 weeks after Christmas, when the holiday lights had gone out and everyone had returned to their regular routines, I got a call from Mom. "Melissa, your dad hurt his back while cleaning out the garage. Come home and help him a bit." Her voice was soft but tired. I almost said no. After everything that happened on Christmas Eve, I didn't want to go back there. But then, something inside me stirred. Not concern for Dad, but a sense that something wasn't right. My family never called me home unless they needed something. After a brief pause, I said, "I'll come." That afternoon, I drove to the house, feeling like a stranger the moment I stepped through the door. Everything looked the same. Too perfect, too meticulously arranged like a postcard. The walls were still covered with photos of Lauren, her first ballet performance, the celebration for her role in a small play, her graduation from an art school my parents once bragged about to everyone, and me. Just one small photo on the bookshelf, the only one from my college graduation, partly hidden behind a stack of magazines. I walked into the living room where Dad was sitting in an armchair, rubbing his back, wincing like he was in pain. "Can you help me rearrange some boxes in the garage?" he asked, without a single greeting. I nodded. If they saw me as just the help, I would play that role. One last time. While I was organizing the old boxes, I noticed Dad's office door wasn't closed like it usually was. It was slightly ajar, and inside, a faint glow from the desk lamp spilled out. Something drew me in. The office was still tidy, but something felt off. The safe, which Dad always kept locked, was slightly open, like someone had forgotten to shut it properly. Dad was meticulous. He never forgot to lock the safe. My heart pounded. Part of me said to walk away, but another part pushed me forward. I swallowed hard and slowly opened the safe door. Inside were stacks of neatly arranged documents. I ran my fingers across the folders until I saw a large envelope with messy handwriting. "Open only if I die." My hands shook. What was this? Without hesitation, I opened the envelope. Inside was a stack of legal documents, numbers, signatures. But when I read the first page, a chill ran down my spine. My name, on a property deed. I read it again and again, thinking I must be mistaken. But no. The document clearly stated that an apartment belonged to me, purchased 5 years ago, in my name. I had never heard of this. I kept flipping through the pages, my heart pounding. Bank statements, loans, strange transactions, all under my name. But what made me go cold were the signatures. They were mine. Only one problem. I had never signed any of it. I gripped the edge of the documents. What had they done? What had my parents done with my name? I skimmed the financial records, each line of text slicing deeper into my awareness. Mortgages, wire transfers, all executed in my name. And worse yet, a large loan taken out just 3 years ago. To pay for Lauren. I couldn't believe it. They had used my name to borrow money to support her. Without ever asking me. It wasn't just favoritism anymore. They had used me. They turned me into their financial shadow, their safety net. A name they could manipulate with ease. I placed the stack of documents on the desk, trying to breathe slowly to stay calm. But the truth? I wasn't calm at all. The betrayal was twisting inside me like an underground current, ready to break the surface. I closed my eyes for a second, then opened them again. This time, I wouldn't let it go. They thought I'd always be the one standing in the background, the obedient daughter who silently accepted the unfairness. But they were wrong. I walked out of Dad's office, still clutching the stack of documents I had found. My heart was pounding in my chest, but not from fear, from rage. They had used me for years without my knowledge. They used my name to borrow money, to cover up their financial messes, to keep spoiling Lauren, without once thinking of the consequences. But this time, I wasn't going to stay quiet. That night, I went back to my apartment, spread the documents out on the table, and combed through every number. I wasn't a financial expert, but I saw enough to know how serious this was. I needed someone who could help me unravel everything. The next morning, I called Ethan, a financial lawyer I'd worked with on a past project. Ethan wasn't just smart, he was thorough and cautious. "Melissa? Long time no talk. What's going on?" His voice came through the phone, calm and professional. "I need your help," I said plainly. "It's pretty big." I sent him all the documents I had and scheduled a meeting with him that same afternoon. When I walked into his office, his eyes were already serious. "Melissa," he began, sliding the papers back toward me. "This isn't just financial misuse. This is fraud. If you want, you can press charges." I took a deep breath. I didn't want things to go that far, at least not yet. What I wanted was a plan. A way to take back what was mine, without a direct confrontation. "I need to know what they did with the money," I said. "What assets they used as collateral, how much they still owe." Ethan nodded, and after a few days of digging, he came back with information that stunned me. The lake house. It was the house my parents used to brag about as a precious family asset. A place they and Lauren visited every summer while I was rarely invited. They had mortgaged it 3 years ago to pay off debt. Lauren's debt. Ethan showed me the loan documents. My parents had used the house as collateral to help Lauren start her own fashion brand, and as I had suspected, it failed. Worse, they had fallen behind on the payments, and now the house was about to be repossessed and sold at auction by the bank. A slow smile spread across my face. I didn't need to confront them. I didn't need to yell or argue. I was going to do something they'd never expect. I was going to buy that house. I couldn't let my parents know I was behind the purchase. If they found out, they'd try to stop me. So Ethan and I came up with a plan. We would use a third party, a trusted investment firm Ethan had connections with, to buy the house from the bank without my name ever appearing. The purchase went through faster than I expected. Within a few weeks, the paperwork was complete. I looked at the new ownership contract. Now, the lake house no longer belonged to them. It belonged to me. But I didn't announce it right away. I waited patiently, watching my parents' every move. I listened as they complained to friends about how the bank was being unfair by seizing the house. I saw my mom desperately calling people she knew, trying to borrow money to buy it back. I read Lauren's texts, furious that our parents are so useless for not keeping the family's precious property. And I waited. Waited for the perfect day to reveal everything. Christmas. The Christmas tree in the living room was just as lavishly decorated as every other year, glowing with soft yellow lights and bright red ornaments. The scent of gingerbread and cinnamon wafted from the kitchen, mixing with the artificial holiday cheer my family worked so hard to create. I stood by the window, watching the snow fall slowly through the glass, feeling unusually calm. They had no idea. They didn't know that this Christmas would be unlike any other before. Lauren sat in the center of the living room, as if it were her own private celebration. Her red-painted nails traced the rim of a wine glass, her lips curved into a satisfied smile. She was certain she'd receive yet another extravagant gift tonight, a new car, a luxury vacation, or a piece of jewelry worth a year's salary to most people. My mother stepped forward, holding a gift wrapped in elegant silver paper. "Sweetheart Lauren, This is a very special present just for you. Lauren blinked excitedly, quickly tearing off the wrapping like a child. When the box lid came off, she let out a breathy sigh of satisfaction. A key. Guess what? My mom smiled, pride in her voice. We bought you a new apartment. A perfect place, right in the city center, modern, elegant. You deserve it. Lauren beamed, throwing her arms around both of them, sneaking a glance at me as if to say, once again, this is how things are. This is where I belong. I clenched my fists in my coat pockets. They hadn't changed. They never would. But that was okay, because tonight, everything would be different. I waited until the laughter and congratulatory chatter about Lauren's gift died down. Once everyone had returned to their seats, I stood up slowly and pulled a small white box from my bag. I have a gift for you too, I said, my voice calm but echoing in the room. My dad frowned as he took the box from me. It wasn't wrapped in shiny paper, no bow, no decorations. Just a plain box. But I knew what was inside was worth more than any gift they'd ever received. He opened it and pulled out a thick envelope bearing a law firm's logo in the corner. What's this? He asked, flipping open the stack of documents. It took exactly 3 seconds. My mom stared at the pages, her eyes widening as she realized what she was looking at. Lauren leaned forward, trying to read the bolded lines. The room fell completely silent. A moment ago, Lauren had been glowing. Now she stared at me, confused, waiting for an explanation. My dad turned the pages over and over, as if hoping the content would somehow change. But it didn't. It was clear from the very beginning. I was the legal owner of the lake house. The house they once called their treasure, the house they used to show off to their friends, the house they secretly mortgaged to pay off Lauren's debts. And now it belonged to me. My dad took a deep breath, gripping the papers so tightly his knuckles turned white. Melissa, this can't be right. It's completely legal. I sat down, crossed my legs, and looked straight at them. You couldn't keep up with the debt. The bank seized the property. And I bought it through a third party. My mom's mouth fell open, but no words came out. Lauren shook her head over and over, like she'd just heard the most absurd thing in the world. No way. That house has always belonged to this family. I met her gaze, my voice steady and firm. Lauren, let me make this very clear. It's not this family's. It's mine. The air in the room grew heavy. My mother began to tremble, her eyes darting around, searching for a reason, a way to fix this. We can work something out, she said, voice hopeful. We can find a way to keep the house. I tilted my head slightly, a cold smile tugging at my lips. No. My dad slammed his hand on the table, his eyes burning with fury. Do you even know what you're doing? That house is part of our family. I raised an eyebrow, leaning forward, my voice sharper than ever. Family? Are you talking about the family that used my name to take out loans? The family that forged my signature to cover up Lauren's mistakes? The family that's treated me like I was invisible? My mom went pale. Lauren stared at me in shock. Finally, my dad muttered, his voice low and threatening. If you walk out of here, you're no longer part of this family. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and walked to the door. Before opening it, I turned around and looked at each person in the room. Fine, because I never truly belonged to this family. Then I slammed the door behind me. Stepping out into the white snow, I took a deep breath. The air was freezing, but for the first time in years, I felt light. I walked away from that house, leaving behind the angry shouts and desperate pleas. The door slammed shut behind me, cutting off everything I had once tried to hold on to. Recognition, affection, or any hope that they would ever change. The snow was falling heavier as I made my way to the car, tiny flakes clinging to my black coat. I opened the door, sat in the driver's seat, but didn't start the engine right away. I just sat there, hands on the steering wheel, staring at the soft yellow lights glowing from the living room window. Inside, I knew everything was falling apart. My dad would be flipping through the documents, searching for some legal loophole to reclaim the lake house. But there wasn't one. I had made sure every detail was airtight and lawful. My mom was probably already on the phone with someone she knew, trying to find a way to negotiate, to find someone who could talk me out of it. But just like always, she wasn't doing it out of love, only because she needed a solution. Lauren. I could imagine exactly how she was reacting. Her blue eyes wide with disbelief, her perfect mouth twisted in rage. She had never imagined a day when something wouldn't be hers. Her whole life she had believed that if anything ever went wrong, our parents would fix it, would find a way, would make sure she kept everything. But not this time. I started the engine and drove away from that place without looking back once. In the days that followed, my phone buzzed constantly with missed calls and messages from my family. Mom called, Dad called, even Lauren sent long, rambling texts, demanding answers, accusing me, throwing cruel words my way. Who do you think you are? You've destroyed this family. Give the house back. Our parents spent their whole lives building it. You have no right to take it. Achilles respond. When the threats didn't work, they turned to begging. My mother left a long voicemail, her voice hoarse like she'd been crying. Melissa, you know we have nowhere to go if we lose the lake house. This isn't just property, it's our family's history. Please, think it over. I'm begging you. I didn't respond. Then came a message from my dad, shorter but laced with anger. You can't do this to your own family. But what had they done to me all these years? Not once did anyone think they couldn't do this to me. Weeks passed, and the messages started to slow down. News from acquaintances told me my family was in serious financial trouble. They had lost the most valuable asset they ever owned, the one they used as collateral for every previous loan. Without the lake house, the bank wasn't lenient anymore. My mom had to sell off many valuable items to try and cover some of the debt. My dad, the man who once prided himself on holding the family together, was now searching for a job at nearly retirement age. Lauren. She couldn't accept the truth. I heard she had begged our parents to fix it, but they had no way left. I could picture her frantically calling every connection she had, but no one was willing to help. The luxurious life she once took for granted was slowly crumbling. And me. I didn't care. I spent my time fixing up the lake house, turning it into a place that truly belonged to me. No more objects my parents had chosen to show off their status. No more photos of Lauren everywhere. I changed everything. Every curtain, every rug, every picture frame. I made it into a space that was mine alone, with no trace of the past. Each morning I made coffee and sat by the window, looking out over the still lake, listening to birds instead of familiar, cold criticism. No more dinners where I was the quiet shadow beside Lauren. No more hollow glances when I tried to prove I mattered. No more hopeless waiting for the day they might love me the way I deserved. They had lost me a long time ago. Now, I'm no longer the daughter of that family. I am simply myself. The wind swept gently across the lake, carrying a crisp chill of winter. I stood on the front porch of the lake house, a cup of hot tea in hand, and took a deep breath. No more messages, no more calls, no more anger or pleading from my parents or Lauren. Only silence. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to prove anything to anyone. In the early days after leaving my family, I thought I'd feel empty, that a part of me would want to go back, hoping for remorse, an apology, some small sign that they realized what they had done. But then I realized I wasn't waiting for that anymore. What I used to want, love, recognition, the feeling of being valued, had died long ago. And that death didn't happen on Christmas Eve when I walked out. It had started years earlier, in the forgotten birthdays, the missed accomplishments, the countless times I gave my all and still remained a fading shadow. I used to think that if I could reclaim the lake house, if I could make them see how wrong they'd been, I would feel victorious. But as I watched them fall apart, I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No revenge. Only freedom. I didn't take back the house to get back at them. I took it back because it was mine. Because for the first time in my life, I wanted something that belonged solely to me. Something that couldn't be taken away, denied, or dismissed. I had spent too many years chasing love from people who never intended to give it. And now, I had stopped hoping they ever would. True freedom didn't come from defeating them. It came from letting go of the expectation that they would become who I needed them to be. I spent the following weeks restoring the house, corner by corner. Every trace of my family slowly disappeared. I took down Lauren's old pictures and replaced them with photos I loved. I repainted the bland beige walls with warmer tones. I laid down new rugs, chose furniture I actually liked, not things meant to flaunt wealth. Each morning I woke up, made coffee, and sat by the window looking out over the still lake. I didn't think about them anymore. I didn't wonder what they were doing, if they regretted anything, or if they realized what they had lost. Because it didn't matter anymore. I used to believe that freedom came when I could look them in the eyes and prove I was stronger, that I didn't need them. But it turns out, freedom came from something much simpler. Not thinking about them at all. No longer letting them control my emotions. No longer feeling the need to react to anything they did or said. My life now didn't include them. And I felt more at peace than ever. One late afternoon, as I was walking around the lake, my phone buzzed, an unknown number. I stared at the screen, that old feeling briefly returning. Anxious, uncertain, expectant. But this time, I simply smiled and didn't answer. I didn't need to know who it was. Maybe it was my parents. Maybe it was Lauren. Maybe it was someone from my past. But I had left the past behind. And Miss Reese's story isn't just about betrayal or revenge. It's about reclaiming self-worth. In life, many people spend years chasing validation from those who will never truly value them. But freedom doesn't come from making others regret. It comes from letting go of empty expectations and choosing yourself. When we stop waiting for love from those who don't know how to give it, only then can we truly be free. Happiness isn't in forgiveness or revenge. It's in choosing to live for yourself. What do you think about Melissa's story? Was she right to take back what was hers and walk away from a toxic family? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, real-life stories about family and life.